Hello, welcome to Margin Time, the extra inning of Puzzle Wednesday, where we talk with game developers, community heads, and other people that are just doing stuff in the puzzle game community. Today I have with me birdup,
Hello,
who
everybody.
you've been a long time pillar for the Magical Drop community, specifically Magical Drop 3, but there's new exciting things on the horizon, both with future games and access to games that we've never gotten to try before. Wink wonk later down the line. But you've had what 4, 5, 6 year relationship with the community here. How did you get into Magical Drop as a series?
So, so it's kind of a long story, and I will do my best to keep the timeline straight. The story starts in Florida, so
Oh God.
specifically Daytona Beach, Florida, up there with one of my least favorite cities in the world. It's like that and Vegas really going head to head. Uh, they
I have
just
my
both
thoughts on
happen.
Daytona.
They both happen to just house very large FGC tournaments. So I'm at Daytona Beach for CEO 2016. I'm attending at the time as a Third Strike player, and in some capacity, I'm managing like a local esports team that my friends and I created, where we were sponsoring melee players that were in our community and helping them get to larger events. This is also the first and the only time that I've convinced some of my non-fighting game community friends to attend a fighting game major with me. Partially because there was all of like the AEW wrestling stuff taking place at the CEO that year, and partially the fact that we all had planned to go to Disney World afterwards. We were in Florida. Um, so since my other friends don't play any particular game, they didn't think to bring any controllers with them. So I spent a lot of time hanging out with them in like the Jabali Land arcade, and probably by happenstance, like I can't even really remember the moment we saw the Magical Drop 3 cabinet there. And I remember being pretty much immediately hooked. I probably got suckered in by like the art style. I'm somebody who like enjoys tarot cards, especially at that time. I was doing tarot readings just for the fun of it, and so much so we had played at the arcade that we went back to the room later that evening and we got the fightcade set up going, and we were playing in the room after hours. Continuing to try to grind the game. Uh, it turns out that the world record speedrunner at the time, whose gamer tag is Aris, who I know from the Melee community, she's in attendance. And at one point over the weekend, she sees us playing and she has to join in. She then spends the rest of the weekend like absolutely whooping our ass, like not even close. I think maybe I took one game against her out of probably 100. It was just it was really bad, not in our favor at all. And now that I'm on the other side of the table, I have certainly done this to people, so I could just you know it was really an encapsulation of that whole experience. She was also wearing like a wrist brace the whole time, and she'd sit down, take off the wrist brace, kick our ass for like 30 minutes, and be like, "I need a break," and then put the wrist brace back on and sit behind us and like watch the two of us play each other until her wrist felt better. Um, so it's a lot of fun. I think in part I wouldn't be here today without Eris, so thank you to her. But we get back to New York after the trip, and I try to convince my friends who are playing to continue to play. But for a couple of reasons, like life picking back up and us going to work, the fact that they're all like, "No, you're going to get way more serious than us, and then you're just going to kick our ass, and it's not going to be fun for us." It completely falls off, and I shift my attention back to Third Strike for the foreseeable. So let's skip forward a couple of years. We're now at Defend the North 2019, which is here in New York. And yet again, I'm entered for Third Strike, which is upstairs in this like random room with all of the candy cabinets in it. And yet again, there's a Magical Drop 3 cabinet there. I think it's part of like one of the multi-switcher Neo Geo machines at that point. And I started playing around against the computer before a couple of people came up and started asking me questions about it. They had never played before, so I spent some time teaching them the basics so that they could play against one another. And then I think just that moment of seeing people who I taught the game and then coming back later in the afternoon and seeing them teaching other people the game to play that was like a really formative, like, this is cool moment. Like, I like the concept of teaching other folks how to play games and like them disseminating that information. So I think, the final big factor that gets me to stick is that I'm actually kind of nice with it, right? Like the game clicks kind of right off the bat with me during Defend the North. There were people, I was playing with all the people that I had taught, and I was kind of kicking their ass. But then people who were familiar with Magical Drop started coming up to the cab and playing, right? And you think, if you're in that arcade environment and you are also kind of nice with it, and you see people playing on a cab, you're like, oh, I'm gonna go take that cab over, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna become the guy who's gonna be the one who's beating everybody. And how many folks would like come up and sit down and then attempt to beat me thinking that they knew what they were doing and then lose to me despite like I didn't know how to unlock secret characters. I didn't know really that mirror matches were that much of a thing. um it started like calcifying all that information in my brain that I was picking up from people who had more experience than me, but I was still winning, and I was like, oh, maybe this is my game, like
Can
maybe.
I can I ask a question there that just came up?
Yeah.
Back at that point in 2019, was doing mirror matches a considered like established rule set yet?
No, so no, not in the US scene, to my understanding. They had
Mm,
to run this at like Big House and at Genesis to some degree. And they didn't enforce the mirror matching rule, to my understanding. When I played with Aris when I first started learning, she wasn't telling us anything about that.
mm,
We would just pick whoever we wanted, and I think we had an understanding that certain characters are stronger than other ones, but we were just kind of picking based on who we liked.
mm,
Um, at Defend the North, players from Texas. I think there's like the free play arcade scene down there,
mm,
or the arcade UFO. I forget what arcade they actually went to. They apparently played Magical Drop on the side alongside whatever other events they were having there. So they had a rule set that they played mirror matches and stuff like that. So they talked to me about it when we were sitting down. They were just like always picking the same. They do what I do now, where it's like if you're
mm,
playing somebody you don't know is familiar with the rules, you wait for them to pick, and then you just pick the same character as them. And then
mm.
eventually, when they ask you like, "Why do you keep doing that?" you tell them.
Yeah.
Um, they also, I remember at the time, like secret characters, I think were banned, um, or at least like a couple of them were, like maybe Father's Strength. But I had never seen anybody open the secret character menu before. So I was sitting there at the cab, and they opened up this menu with all these other characters. Like, oh shit, what did you do? And they went through like the very arcane process of explaining how you actually unlock the secret characters for Magical Drop. Um, but yeah, I don't think there was anything really established at that point. It was just like, what were the rules that you played with locally with the people that you knew who played the
Mm,
game? Um, but I think that's kind of like so. At the end of Defend the North, there was still nobody to really play against locally, right? I didn't have any
mm,
puzzle game friends. I didn't really play that many games online. Like I used Fightcade, but I never really thought to be like I should play Magical Drop on Fightcade. Um, so I went the other route, right? That's available to people who are good at stuff but don't necessarily have the group of friends to play. And I started speedrunning the single player mode, because I knew from having met Aris and seeing her videos, like there was a world record and she was the world record holder. So I started watching her videos and kind of reverse engineering her strategy, like learning about why two chains are good and things like that, and then start speedrunning to try to get onto the leaderboard. And at one point, I finally make the leaderboard for like speedrun.net or whatever the website is,
mm,
and that links me through to the Discord. Right, somebody had put a link to the Discord into their forum probably a year or two prior. So I joined the Discord, and I think from there it kind of that's the start of like it becoming what it is today, right? But it was like a
mm.
long process. Right? I started in 2016. I wasn't on the Discord for at least 3 years. Um, so it was definitely a long while before we really got going, and it kind of like became something that I was actively pursuing.
Through that story, there are like two things that always feel like the absolute death knell of motivation there that you went
Mhm.
through. And the two that clocked to me is like playing the 100-to-1 sets and
Yeah,
still hanging out from that, and then falling into the best of the friend group. Because,
yeah,
Lord, it's so hard to build a scene when you have deeply mismatched motivation levels there.
yeah.
So,
I
it,
think to those 2 points, like for the first one, I like a historic 0-2 or 1-2 or 2-2 or in any game I've ever played. Right? Like, I don't think I was ever better than 2-2, except on like days where I was playing out of my mind for Melee or for Third Strike.
Hmm.
And I was used to playing in communities. Like New York had a very strong Melee scene. We had a very strong Third Strike scene where I would go to the arcade, where I'd go to the local, and I'd just get whooped by like the top players that were there. Um, so we're recording this the day after Evo, and I had mentioned to you beforehand that Frankie BFG, who made top 6 at um, Evo for Third Strike this year, went to our local arcade to play Third Strike. But he was the best player there, but there was also like 4 or 5 other people that were on his level or like just below it. So I was going to the arcade, and just like there'd be days where I would probably take one game out of however many, and somebody would just be stationed on the other side of the cab with the people who were kind of like the fodder rotating in on the other side, just getting destroyed, and they're having like 25-game win streaks and things like that. So I'm very used to that. I also like, I don't mind losing. I love to
Hmm.
keep score. And I tell people this, that like I really like organized sports because I like to keep score, and I don't care if I'm on the losing side so long as I know what the score was. So I could kind of see myself gradually getting better.
Hmm.
Right. In terms of the motivation for the friend group thing, yeah, I think that's always really hard, especially if you don't have another scene around you. I'm lucky to live in New York City, and that we have active games for all the other games that I was playing. So Magical Drop was kind of like my peripheral game, right? If it was there, I would play it. But I always had a stable community for Melee. I always had a stable community for Third Strike when I wanted it. So that kept me going, right? That there was at least some other competitive, video game I could put my efforts into,
Hmm.
that kept me engaged in the scene in a way that, like, if I was just the best in my friend group but there was nowhere else to play, I don't think I would have been able to stay engaged.
All right. So that takes us to speedrunning era, and you're in the Magical Drop Discord.
Yeah.
Let's get to bridging the gap to how did you start becoming a actual versus mode organizer? Like, what's the through line to getting people together?
Right. So I think this is a lot more straightforward than my previous response in terms of like when I was speedrunning, I was playing on Fightcade, but I was
Hmm.
always set to like do not disturb mode on Fightcade. And eventually I started seeing people playing in the Fightcade channels when I would just go and look at Fightcade to like boot the test game for me to speedrun in. Um, and by watching people playing versus in there and seeing like their approximate skill level compared to my own, I was like, I think I could win against a lot of these people. And I remember just being part of the Discord. I think it was Dingo Dial at the time. So shout outs to Dingo Dial, who I've met in person since. We've met at Genesis, I think, once or twice. Um, Basically had mentioned that they wanted to host a tournament, right? They thought that there was like enough people who were kind of like sort of active on the Discord, but not necessarily checking in all the time. That they're like, hey, if we run a tournament, maybe more people will want to play this game, or at least play more actively. So they started organizing it, but they're like, I don't really know too much about tournament organizing. I could probably use a little help. And at the time, I had run a bunch of tournaments. I think we have a question for this later, so I could touch on it then. But I had
Hmm.
a pretty long history of TOing, um, just for the games I played locally. And I was like, oh, I could help. And I think it ended up going from like, oh, I could help to I was in charge within like a week or so. So
Uh,
like coming up with the rule set, and getting everybody, organized enough to show up and play at a specific time. Um, so for the rule set, everything was already sort of fairly fleshed out because the France scene was like part of this Discord, and they had posted their rule set. So I basically just took the French rule set and made a few tweaks. So the two tweaks that I made, one was like starting Magician instead of starting on Emperor, which is who their starting character was.
mhm.
One, because Magician's a little bit weaker, and I was always of the opinion that like that first character should be sort of a coin flip to whether you're winning on pressure or winning on quota. Um, and for flavor, right? Magician is the first tarot card. If you don't count Fool, he's number one.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that you'd pick tarot card number one in the tarot card game to be the first character you play every game. I also added the counter picking rules that I adapted from Melee. So in Melee, it's called Dave's Stupid Rule. You can't pick a stage you've won on already. so that when you're counter picking stages, I can't just keep taking you to my best stage. So I just adapted that for Magical Drop. It's like you can't pick a character you already won as, so that you couldn't just keep taking them back to your best character. Um, there were some other scenes that I looked at for reference, right? So Ballier in France runs tournaments,
Hmm.
though his tournaments are generally gated to the EU only, just for connection purposes. But outside of that, there wasn't really much serious organizing going on for the game, at least in like a Magical Drop specific sense. I don't know. Like, I don't think I was familiar with you guys at this point in time yet. Like, I think we met after this, so
Uh,
I don't know if you guys had run Magical Drop prior to
I
me becoming part of the scene.
I have a little story about that actually,
Oh
because
yeah,
it's
sure.
funny. I had met someone who was a EU player actually for Money Puzzle Exchanger first,
Which one?
and
Do I know?
the name is Indigo Trance. They
No, I don't
don't
think
have any involvement. It wasn't even that. It was just we both like really, really liked the game, and if it just even passingly came up on Twitter, it's just like, hey, money guy.
I.
And he
Yeah,
eventually started a money puzzle exchanger Discord, and
yeah,
essentially, without any prior knowledge, came to the exact same formatting, basically with exchangers start, mirror matches across the board, and
yeah,
throwing a pick counter pick system on it. And this question was largely for me on the rule set because I was always aware of the French magical drop rule set,
yeah,
but to my understanding, I don't think when we ran it, I just like in the before times where we did it a couple of times before meeting you, I just copy pasted that and we ended up having the same
yeah,
thing
yeah.
anyway. So, I mean,
Their rule
same
set was
process of
good,
events, just different end.
right? Their rule set was fine, right? Like they played
Hmm.
enough that it felt legitimate. I don't remember for sure if they allowed father strength. Now that I'm thinking about it, um, but I just remember having played enough at that point in time, being like, I don't really like as long as it's a mirror match, I don't see why there should be a character that's banned, right? If both players
Hmm.
have to be subjected to the same nonsense, then like why not let it rock? Um, but I think just in general, like the reception to that first event was good enough that I wanted to keep doing it, right? And we were doing it for a while. But to be honest, like if it wasn't for the external support from like you guys and some other folks who have helped kind of shoulder the load over the past couple of years, like I don't can't say for certain that I would still be hosting events. Um, namely just because like burnout is so easy to
Hmm.
happen for somebody who's a TO, especially if they don't have any support. Like how many people I've seen get run through the ringer and just like get burned out on their favorite game and say like I can't do this anymore. Um, yeah, it's just like I'm definitely very thankful to you and to the whole Puzzle Wednesday team and to anybody else who's ever kind of stepped in to make my life a little bit easier. Um, because I wouldn't be here like in this chair still talking. I don't think, at least if it wasn't for all of y'all.
So there's I mean, beyond thank you, there's two things that I feel in our own experience kind of mirror that. And
Mm.
one, it's the backbone of like why we're a variety scene because I got my start organizing Puyotet in like 2018, and that only lasted a year locally because results were getting so stratified that
Yeah,
people were dropping off, and that's when like 2019, the start of that year, we started throwing new games into the mix. Like year one of nameless locals was I think Wario's Woods, Mr. Driller G, Tricky Towers, Magical Drop 3, Money Puzzle Exchanger, Cross Sneak Plus. Basically, 90% of what you could find on like Switch arcade archives.
right. Just like what you had available for you to run.
Yeah. And there was still a fantastic lineup on that.
For sure.
Switch
That's good.
the Switch has done so much for puzzle as a genre. Let's
Hmm.
put that out there. But the other thing is like I don't see other spaces running tournament as competition. I would love people to be like, you know what? I'm glad you guys run that, but I want to take that the extra mile because it will always free us up to be like, okay, now we can prioritize pack attack a little a
Yeah.
little
Then you
more,
kind
but like
of, if this folks kind of like graduate out of the Puzzle Wednesday lineup when somebody is passionate enough to be like, I want to run this full time.
and we've been lucky enough to have like you and the Dr. Mario community taking to Fightcade so hard has also been a blessing. Like, yeah, we can run it when we want, but it's so nice that the people that are there strictly for that have something now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, no, trust me, having a good network to keep this going is invaluable.
Yeah. And I think too, there's now people who like reach out to me on the peripheral to like when they want to run Magical Drop. Like I've had people reach out for like Alex Alchemy, who runs the charity event
Hmm.
that raises money for various charities. I think generally autism related.
Hmm.
Reaches out to me whenever they want Magical Drop as part of one of their events. The Puzzle Kingdom people have reached out to me a couple of times to either host something for them or assist in them hosting something because we were part of Sakura Blend this year
Hmm.
maybe last year. I forget exactly what year it was.
Time is fake.
Um, yeah, but it's there's just like I've now become. I think part of why we're doing this interview is like I've become the magical drop guy,
Oh my god.
and I am now like the point of reference for other puzzle game communities because they just either stumble upon the website or they've seen my name associated with all of the stuff that I've done or that we've done collectively as part of Puzzle Wednesday, and they'll reach out and ask questions and things like that. So uh, having that sort of figurehead makes it easier for other people who want to get involved as well because you know who to talk to. Right? It's not just like this faceless entity that you can't get into contact with.
Speaking of being the magical drop guy, we're gonna sidebar a little bit off the beaten trail of questions here to something we
Yeah.
talked about in the lead up here, but it's interesting to me that you're now the magical drop guy because there's definitely, depending on who you ask in the FGC, another magical drop guy. Um,
A very
very
famous magical
famous
drop
guy.
guy. Yeah.
You might hear him every once in a while. Justin Wong was a particular champion for Magical Drop 3, and I have a couple friends in Data FGC who relayed a story to me a long time ago. Uh, this is from Kara. She's very high up there in that doing like stage work for a bunch of the bigger FGC majors now.
Mhm.
And Data FGC always brings Magical Drop 3 as one of their cabinets for when they're providing for like arcade rooms. Always makes it a CEO. Might have been their cab you played on first,
Probably.
but
If they
uh,
if they run the CEO arcade, that was probably yeah.
at least a small part of it. It's still usually like 4 or 5 providers across the entire room. But uh, they got their start running Puyo Tet. Like that was the big game, and Atlanta has a lot of strong Puyo players. But uh, she had relayed that's like, I wanted to get better at this game. I was playing in the arcade, and Justin Wong walks up to me. He's like, "Hey, this game looks kind of neat. Can you tell me how to play this one?" And they play. She talks about it a little bit. They play a game, and she just decimates him. And then he turns around like, okay, no, I think I get it now. And we reveal the smurfing all along, and
Yeah.
he just decimates her and puts her in the ground. And I think that's still one of the funniest experiences I've ever heard of. But he definitely carries some cultural cachet with the game.
For sure.
Like,
He's retweeted stuff in relation to Majidora Masters in the past when I've asked
mm-hmm,
him, and it's always brings like a lot of engagement, which is nice. We did have a one. I
mm-hmm,
think that's like a very good encapsulation of like Justin's personality too. Like that he's always kind of like a little bit of that like jokester and never taking things too seriously, which is pretty cool. And I think that what makes him such like a good ambassador for the scene and for like many individual games. Uh, I think we had our passing of the torch moment then in terms of being Magical Drop guy because he was hosting some sort of charity stream, and
Hmm.
essentially like if you made a donation, he would play against you in the game of your a game of your choosing. And I think it's uploaded to my channel. I think you've probably seen it because I
Oh
posted
yeah.
it when it happened. But I went into the stream and I was like, "Hey man, I'll donate $20 if you play Magical Drop with me, and I'll donate more if you could win." And he was like, "Oh, I'm super nice at this game. Like, let's play." And I was like, "Sure, man, let's play." Uh, and we like hop on Fightcade. He gets set up. He's like talking some smack to his stream. Hyping himself up, being like, "Yeah, I'm nice at this game." I'm just sitting there like watching the stream on my other screen, being like, "Yeah, yeah, you are." And we start playing, and within the first round, he's like, "Oh my god, what is this guy doing? Like, what is happening?" And I don't think I dropped a round. I won 5-0, and then I just donated another $50. I was like, another 50 for the 5-0, baby. And it was good. That's a cherished memory of mine. Um, just like getting the chance to play against him because he's been at all of the events that he was at, that CEO that I was at, he was at the
Hmm.
Defend the North that I was at, but he never sauntered over to the machine. We didn't see him there, so I've been trying to track him down to get my match, and we finally got it.
No, that was the feather in the cap. This was the reversal that I always wanted to happen.
Yeah,
So
he got smurfed on by somebody else finally.
it's, it's fantastic bookends. But I definitely wanted to make a little time for that story.
Yeah,
But
I think he's like one of my favorite personalities in the scene. I don't have like a strong personal relationship with him, so I can't super speak to it.
hmm,
But in my mind, as the kind of full of myself guy that I am from time to time, especially when I'm winning at Magical Drop, uh, he posts a lot of videos of him playing other games, and like playing against somebody on Fightcade, and he'll like post the video of like, "Oh my god, I played the best Streetmen versus X Fighter guy or X Men versus Street Fighter guy of all time," and it'll be a set that he's running like super close against this guy who's clearly very good and specialized at this game. I never got the video of like I ran into the best Magical Drop player on Fightcade
oh.
on his channel because he got smacked. Like he had nothing to show from his side. So let it be heard. There is a
oh.
video on his channel about him being the best Magical Drop player that's like years and years old. It's probably from like 2018 or 2019 before the scene
Mhm.
was really like built. And there's a bunch of comments on that video from before the scene was built also of people that I know now, like French players, a couple of other people who are like, you're playing this random person, you're not playing anybody who's really good. Like you got to come play one of us. So not only was it the catharsis for myself to go and beat Justin Wong at his own game, but it was a catharsis for like the whole scene. There's all of those people who have been like, somebody needs to play Justin Wong to show him that we're really strong. And I was like, I'll be the guy to do it. And we made it happen. Glad I didn't let everybody down.
So, extending beyond just TO work, you shoulder an extra burden that I don't think any of us at Puzzle Wednesday have tackled as well. You do resource management. You made PlayMagicalDrop.com,
Yeah.
which has a number of features beyond the basics of here's how a game works, here's the broad strokes of meta, here's the tournament rules, but
hmm
higher concept tech, a damage calculator, which
That's
is
that's all Xerxene, so
that's
I'll give him
Cerusian,
that.
but we're gonna
Yeah.
still loop that into the Herculean task of actually grouping information together. Because as
Yeah,
much as
yeah.
a Puzzle Wednesday of like we know stuff, getting things outside of just old Discord messages it's an effort, and it's
Yeah.
always going to be important because all the lights could turn off to this one day, and then what do we have?
Yeah, for sure. I will say, just to lead this off, because you kind of already referenced it, like storing information in a place that is not publicly accessible fucking sucks. Like,
Uh huh.
please stop making all of your tech threads like on a Discord that people aren't part of, or as like Google documents that you need to track down from said Discord. When I was trying to play like Tekken and stuff, it's so hard to find just like one page that I could go to reliably to find like bread and butter combos for certain characters, right? Like, and that game's so much bigger than
Mm-hmm.
Magical Drop is. It feels like it should be much easier to kind of have all of that knowledge kind of become centralized somewhere. Whether it's like Dust Loop or what is it, Mizumi is the one for like kind
Mm-hmm.
of the more smaller poverty games.
Yeah.
Like those resources are great and they exist, and like people should spend more time converting the information that exists within a Discord or something to a place that will have more longevity and is more easily accessible. Because I'm not trying to join 6 Discords every time I want to play a new game. I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to join the Discord for matchmaking and the Discord for my character specific tech and the Discord for like general tech. It's just like that's nonsense. I don't have time for that.
Look, the
And
bigger
like
your
you said, like the
scene,
minute one of those disappears, like all of that information's gone.
yeah, the bigger your scene, the easier it is to assume someone else will do it.
Right. That's true. Um, but I guess like for the website itself, for playmagicaldrop.com, its existence is like a combination of many things that were sort of like the perfect storm of inspiration for me to do this. So the first thing is being like the ubiquitous, like it was 2020 and I was bored. I had nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do. I was stuck in my house. I could only play games with people on the internet. I couldn't see a lot of my local friends. So I was just like sitting in my basement or sitting in my backyard being like, what do I do? And I was just started like typing up stuff on my computer, right? To kind of put this knowledge into one place. The initial inspiration, though, comes from the work of like the Guilty Gear Xrd community, specifically spearheaded by like, from my understanding, Pat the Flip, and like all of the folks organizing around him to make that a reality. So all of like Pat's play Guilty Gear posting that was happening on Twitter at the time really kind of flipped the switch on my brain of like, if you yell about something enough times, eventually somebody will hear you yelling about it and be like, "Oh, I like that thing too." Right? How many people get stuck in like the mindset of, "Oh, there's only 10 people play on Fightcade. This game must be dead and I shouldn't participate in it." It's like, "No, like you should, and those 10 people might become like your best friend." So all you need to do is just be loud enough about the game that you like, and eventually somebody else will show up and be like, "I also like that game. Let's play." Uh, so I have to give them like a lot of the inspiration. Obviously, Play Magical Drop is literally just I took Play Guilty Gear and I made it Play Magical Drop. So I stole their branding, but that's fine because they're also doing really well. I know the Xrd scene is currently very big, and they run weeklies and they have like tiered like tournaments so that people can have a good jumping on point, so they're not immediately just getting slammed by people who've been playing the game for a decade. Um, the next piece of the puzzle comes from all of the existence of Maruta's content on Magical Drop. So if you're not familiar, Maruta is like one of, if not the best Magical Drop players of all time. Japanese player who not only has pretty much every speedrun record at this point, from my understanding, also published basically the equivalent of playmagicaldrop.com in Japanese for him to talk about like all the various tech. There's a lot of videos online created by him of like showing all the different ice patterns and like visualizing all of the attack stuff that happens on the game. His blog is still updated regularly, and I've been featured on it because of when I was in Japan, and we'll probably talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
He's got like 200 plus articles on Magical Drop. So when I
Jeez.
was getting into the scene, I started finding people tangentially through Twitter, Maruta being one of them, Yasube being one of the other ones, talking about the game. And I started reading his content, and Google Translate like works well enough for certain scenarios, especially like technical writing, but it definitely struggles to convey any concepts that are written with a lot of lingo, which is pretty much every piece of video game content you could possibly want to read, right? So I'm trying to understand what he's talking about in all of these articles, but they're just littered with like terms that Google Translate does not know how to deal with because they're not terms that are used regularly or in that context in traditional Japanese. So when I started translating it and transcribing it to learn myself and like ingrain the knowledge, I was starting to standardize the language of like how do we refer to these certain situations? How do we refer to like all of the various elements that exist within Magical Drop? And I spent a lot of time looking at other puzzle games to try to understand like what do they call certain things, because stuff that exists in Magical Drop, especially around like chaining and trash and all of that, exists in other puzzle games, and trying to find a way to boil it down so that it was like easy to understand at face value, but also very understandable for anybody coming from a different puzzle game was one of the challenges that I had, that I spent a lot of time thinking about in the creation of this website. So I think I definitely stole phrases from like Puyo Tetris. I stole stuff from Puzzle Fighter just to make sure that we kind of had like a centralized dictionary of how to talk about Magical Drop when the website came out. And I think the very last part of it is just like, this was exacerbated by being stuck at home in 2020, but like I have a habit of like forcing myself to learn little hobbies and do projects.
Hmm?
Uh, I'm an ADHD haver, so
Ah.
my attention span is already very short, and I think that's part of why Magical Drop clicked for me so well, because it could hold my attention, and two, the rounds are so short that I can unfocus between them and then refocus for the next round, in a way that I struggled when I played Melee. Like I played a slow ass character. I played Samus,
Mhm.
and I played the world's most aggressive Samus because I just didn't want to sit there, man. Like I didn't have time to play a 6 minute game against you. I was trying to get everything done in like 2 minutes tops. I picked like all of my counter picks were like some of Samus's worst stages, like in the overall meta game, because I was like, I don't want to sit on the other side of Dreamland
If I
and camp
lose,
you for
so
six
be
minutes.
it.
Yeah, if I lose, I'd rather lose in 2 minutes than lose in 6 minutes, right? So um, this was definitely one of those things where it's like I wanted to do a new little project. I work as a product manager in my day to day. I work for like a small games company that makes games for like an older audience, like solitaire and crosswords and stuff. But because I'm the product manager, there's a lot of like delegating. I don't get to
Mhm.
do a lot of stuff in my job, right? Outside of like go to meetings and make sure people are doing the things that they're supposed to do. So that makes me like want to code. It makes me want to do video and photo editing. It makes me want to write copy. It makes me want to just like get hands on in a way that I don't get to do as part of my actual profession. And play Magical Drop, like the creation process of that website, let me channel like all of that energy, right? I could write code for the website, which I did through Squarespace, so it wasn't really that much coding, but there was definitely some custom stuff that I had to look up and do myself.
Mhm.
The video and photo editing to make the YouTube video that still gets comments and likes to this day, which is nice, about like how to play the game in 3 minutes. Writing copy for the website itself, doing the photo editing to make all of the graphics for the thing. All of that really was like a solo passion project to get that like extra energy out of me that I couldn't channel at my job or do somewhere else. And that's kind of evolved into a bunch of other passion projects that I've done. So I'm doing like solo game dev stuff now. Um, but yeah, I think it was kind of like if all of those pieces didn't come together at the right time, I don't think playmagicaldrop.com would exist. And I think there's also like kind of the unspoken, but I have like disposable income that I could use and burn on Squarespace hosting and buying the domain name. And it's
Mhm.
not that expensive, but it's still like a couple $100s a year, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody wants to spend a couple $100s a year on a website that gets marginal traffic in the grand scheme of.
I mean, look, that's sometimes it's just the investment that's worth it to you. But
For
Lord,
sure.
the this could have only happened in this window. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. It's what this will be uploaded to is absolutely a product of, oh man, I had a lot of free time in 2020
Right.
and a lot of people I could talk into thinking that like organizing tournaments for arcade games that maybe sold like 100 boards was a
Yeah.
good
I,
idea.
I I think like obviously the whole entire 2020 pandemic and the ongoing situation is like horrific in terms of like the global impact and scale of how much like how much sadness it has wrought on the
Hmm.
world. But I do think in the next decade we're going to see so many things come out of like I had so much free time that I became super good at this, or I developed this thing as a tool for people. And playmagicaldrop.com is like part of that in terms of you know a cute thing that came out of being bored at home. But I think there's going to be a lot of like very impactful stuff, or people who learn skills during that period who now go out and like make an impact on the world that they might not have prior, because they just, it was an experiment in like, what if everybody just had a lot more time on their hands? If
Hmm.
people weren't just like stuck working their 9 to 5 and then coming home being exhausted, how would the world look if people just had time to have hobbies in a way that they don't normally?
So the next question is one that I feel applies to you more than it does to us,
Okay.
and that's for being a an event series that pulls from across the globe here.
Yeah.
You seem the more uniquely placed position where you have a far larger player base outside of North America for the game
Yeah.
in concentration compared to us. Has that ever created any real problems or headaches trying to gather everyone together between cultural and language barriers sometimes?
Um. So I think not as much as I would have anticipated had you told me this ahead of time. Um. So I think mostly the biggest issue that we've really had is that somebody messed up the bracket start time because of time zones, right?
Hmm.
They just didn't translate correctly, and they thought the tournament started at 7 when it actually started at 8, or that's the worst. The vice versa is like the worst. Like they thought the tournament started at 8 when it actually started at 7. Um, so we've had people just like miss brackets because they're like, oh, I forgot what time it was, right?
Hmm.
And I think the second part is like English is a pretty shitty language, especially when it's not your first language. So sometimes it's just hard to communicate with certain folks. But Google Translate mostly does the job in that scenario. I think the most serious thing that has happened, and this is I think part of any decentralized scene, so I don't think this is specifically we have a lot of Latin American players or a lot of European players or something. We had somebody we had a group of players approach me at one point, suspecting that somebody during Magidor Masters, which I know we'll talk about in a bit, was double entering bracket under two different names, which is obviously like you can do that for any bracket online, and I've seen that happen in like the Smash scene as well.
Hmm.
This isn't a uniquely like magical drop problem. We spent some time investigating it. We had a discussion with the individuals who were involved. We were able to resolve it without much drama, which was nice. And we haven't had anything of the like happen since then. So I think of all of the stuff that is like serious that may have happened, that was the most serious. But the overall impact on the tournament series or like the scene was negligible when the outcome was kind of we handled it very well. I consulted a lot of people on making sure that we were kind of taking the proper approach to resolving it, and it worked out well instead of just kind of like jumping in and trying to make a gut decision and end up like poisoning some of the player base.
All right.
I think overall, like the international community is one of our biggest strengths in terms of like raising the competition level. Um, when your game is larger, right, and you have more people to play against, right, there it ends up kind of like localizing the competitions, and people can only really get as good as like the size of their pond, essentially, right? Like if
Hmm.
you're only playing with people locally and you're the best out of your friend group, like are you really going to get that much better if you don't have anybody better to play against? And I think having the scene be small and pretty much everybody who's an active participant playing with each other all the time makes it so that it's much easier to level up in general because you're always playing strong competition, and the people who are beating you, are like you're continuing to like iron sharpens iron or whatever the phrase
Hmm.
is there, right? Like our best players are getting better because they're always playing our other best players. There's never like an easy tournament for them because they're always playing the people who are like around their skill level, and they want to get better so that they could come out on top. So they'll continue to improve, and they kind of drag the rest of us up with them.
What a way to put it. I get it though. Also, shout outs to people like Gucky Wumpus for making consistent 2:30 a.m. brackets.
Yes, I think that is, there's the folks who are willing to sacrifice their sleep schedule to participate, who I always want to give a shout out to. So pretty much everybody who plays out of Europe, because when we do the Puzzle Wednesday events, they're always at like 3 in the morning for them.
I'd apologize, but if it wasn't for 8:30 p.m. EST, I don't know that we'd
For
be
sure.
doing this.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So we alluded to it a little bit back there, but what is Magidoro Masters, and what was the impetus for getting that started?
Oh, so I stole that one too, actually.
Oh, God damn it.
Yeah, yeah. So I was really, really ingrained in the Third Strike scene, right, from the initial story. Uh, so I participated a lot in Third Strike. I traveled for that event. I played Melee before that, so I traveled a lot for Melee. And I think the biggest inspiration for Magidora Masters was looking at the jazzy circuit from the Third Strike scene. So I'm from New York, and one of our active players and organizers, Mutant XP, shout outs, uh, like would had this philosophy of like if you build it they will come, like we right, and his thought was basically just like, if you put together some sort of incentive structure for players to be more active in a specific game, the people who care will become more active, right? And you could take a smaller scene and help like lift it up by kind of just dragging people along with you and giving them incentives along the way. And especially if you could find a way to kind of incentivize it so even the people closer to the bottom of the overall rankings or the general skill level have something to work towards, right? um, and especially when the end goal is just having a showcase for your strongest players. So Magidora Masters kind of took that format um, from Jazzy Circuit, where the goal was host regular events with some sort of incentivized structure. Initially, that was money and points. We kind of changed how the money situation worked, but um, and then give your players who earn the spot a chance to shine at the very end, like a capstone invitational tournament where the best of the best players play against each other, because that then becomes your kind of promotional material for the next season, right? If you want to run it again, you have all of your strongest players playing with something big on the line that generates a narrative and gives you the opportunity to kind of share that out with the world so that people who aren't necessarily invested in the game see the stakes of what you've put together and then kind of come and participate or even just observe. So let's go take it back to Justin Wong for a second. He likes this game. He's a promoter of many other games and scenes. I don't think I could get him to regularly retweet like, it's Puzzle Wednesday, come and play Magical Drop, or like,
Mhm.
we're having a monthly come and play Magical Drop. But when I reached out to him and I was like, hey, we've been hosting this invitational tournament series. People have been working for 6 months to qualify for it. We have a $500 prize pool. Do you mind like tweeting this out that this is tomorrow so that people will tune in? He would do that, right? And
Mhm.
he seemed really cool about it. He was very excited and he promoted it for us, and we got a bunch of extra eyeballs on it because of that. Um, so it was really, building that narrative structure to get people who are normally not invested. I think really pays off for a game of this size. I think the other thing too that comes to mind with Magidora Masters is using it as sort of a testing ground for other concepts.
Mhm.
There's a couple of different like bracket formats. We tried out doing IRL qualifiers. All of those things became part of Magidora Masters because it just felt like the right time to try something because it was bigger in scope. So like, why not try something that was a little bit more ambitious than what we were normally doing with just running a challenge bracket online? And because the response to the first one was just so positive from everybody in the community and everybody on the peripheral who were just kind of tuning in to see our big event, it was hard not to feel like I wanted to do another one. Um, right? And then you every year we finish, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to do a next one. And then we get to the end of grand finals of the Magidora Masters, and I'm like, I'm doing one next year. So so I think that's helpful. And I think finally, like, kind of comes to mind creating some sort of like seasonality for your game, I think also benefits the players of that game, right? I
Mhm.
think this I kind of pulled from Melee mostly, where there's the annual rankings, right? And
Mhm.
for a long time, it counted tournaments from January to December. And players were like, I am so burned out. Like playing for 12 months straight just to try to get ranked and then starting again from scratch at the end of the year
Jeez.
is horrible for our wallets, for our mental health, for our physical health from traveling all the time. Um, we don't have that problem because I literally just need to go downstairs, and most people just log onto their computers and play Magical Drop. But still, like saying, okay, the first 6 months of the year are when we're serious about this game and we play the tournament structure that everybody's used to, and there's points on the line and there's money on the line. And the back half of the year, if we miss a month of tournaments, it's not a big deal. If we host a random version of Magical Drop, like Magical Drop F or Magical Drop 2 or, Fool only bracket or whatever it might be, it gives us a little bit of time to kind of,
Decompress.
de-stress,
Yeah.
yeah, and decompress from the tournament structure that we're used to. So I think kind of breaking up the year into like 6 months of serious business, 6 months of like just for fun ends up being very helpful. And it gives kind of an on ramp for players. We saw this year with Draco Mirai and the previous year with Gucky Wumpus. It gives you like an on ramp where you can get up to speed playing the game during that 6 months of off season, and then have a shot at like really making and doing some damage during the on season at the beginning of the next year. So if you're a player who's like only partially engaged with the game and you're like, I don't really want to compete for tournament points because I don't think that I'm good enough, we give you this time of year to kind of build up your confidence as a player before we're throwing you into the fire of like, okay, now it's for something. Good luck.
No, no, I get it. I appreciate the contrast because so much of like what we try to do at Puzzle Wednesday is capture the energy of like going to your weekly,
Yeah.
the best that we can online, and running qualifiers and like for a bigger scope thing definitely is a different energy. There's a different sort of standard we try to meet,
Yeah.
but I am glad there's the off season because time of recording, we've not had our magical drop F bracket. It could go down and crash in flames, but
No, and I already kind of broke it this week, so we actually need to troubleshoot before before the bracket happens.
it could go down in flames. But uh, I live for the off season. For me,
Yeah.
the tournament is just the framing for what the gang is doing tonight.
Hmm.
So I'm glad we get the anti burnout period as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And for me as well, like we didn't have an open bracket in June, and we didn't, for my understanding, have one in July. Though if we fix Magical Drop F, I want to have a community night this month or the beginning of next month, so that people have the opportunity to play a little bit before the Puzzle Wednesday bracket.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's nice for my own mindset. And people are generally pretty busy during the summer, so
Mm-hmm.
it feels better for me to not feel like I'm scrambling and managing all of like these IRL personal events that I have to do during the summer, and also trying to be like, which weekend can I run a tournament for X number of hours, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
I do say, I think I touch on this later in my notes when we'll talk about like, what I want for the future, but this is again, it goes back to having ADHD. Consistency is like a hard thing for me to come by, and it's why I was never like super ingrained in like I did a lot of tournament organizing for New York City for Melee and for some other games, but that like the commitment that you guys have in general, and that I want to give my hat tip to like any TO that runs like a weekly, for you to show up literally every week at the same time is just so for long periods of time, right? How long have you guys been running Puzzle Wednesday? Like 4 years now, plus
Uh,
however long you were running the local before that.
so for Puzzle Wednesday, we'll just split it into a hard online offline window.
Yeah.
I started in early 2018 with Puyotet, going into um, mystery puzzle for
Hmm.
till about early 2020.
Yeah.
Online was about a year of streaming into the void, uh, because it was just our locals group, and like we're gonna do our best to just hold on and keep the ship
Yep.
steering until we see a way out of the
To meet
darkness
up again
there.
in person. Yeah.
Uh, and I've alluded to this a number of times. The two biggest things that put us in the map was we just randomly streamed Cleopatra Fortune one day and Persona Sama, like the lead animator for Skullgirls, like, I like this game. I like you guys. You should keep
Yeah,
doing this. And then we suddenly got enough attention on that single stream between him and Ashley, the dev of Pedal Crash,
yeah,
just hopping in. It's like we both think this is the coolest thing in the world. And like she was giving out Pedal Crash keys in the stream. So
damn,
basically overnight it went from like, oh, I got like it's 10 people brackets that were slowly dropping local people to like picking up a couple of faces that we'd have on staff stream like Trash Boat and Rodney and Suzu to just
yeah.
no, we are suddenly established enough that we should have a Discord server. So it was like 2021
Mhm.
to now, which is, if I'm mathing correct,
At least at
it's
least three
getting
years.
around like we're around like 4 years for Puzzle Wednesday. We're about 7 for my TO it as
In
puzzle
general.
guy in general, which
Right, but the fact
crazy.
is, like, in those, even in just the online era, how many Wednesdays have you guys missed, if any?
I think we only hard canceled like 2.
Right, and that's out of like 150 or 200 different Wednesday possibilities. Plus, you run stuff on Fridays and Saturdays sometimes. Like, I can't imagine doing the same thing on a Wednesday for more than like a month at a time. My brain just like does not compute that. So the fact that they're like any person who TOs like a local or anything that is that structured for such a long period of time will always get my hat tip because I'm the guy who like, oh, I have an idea. I want to run this one big thing. I can hard hyper focus on it for like a 2 month period to get ready to do it, and then my brain just shuts off, and it's like I need to go do something else. That's how my hobbies work. That's how my engagement in most scenes work. So,
That's why we're a variety scene. But the real
yeah,
answer beyond that is just we've had 20 plus people that have been staff over the years, and not any single one of us is doing every single weekly.
right. It definitely helps to have the ability to kind of tag it in and out with the
The
other people.
the obvious one is like streams have historically it used to be exclusively me for like 2 years, and then we
Right.
started doing like Color Thief and Rats and Deca, which shout outs Team USA, but
Oh yeah.
that's so much what keeps the weekly quote unquote structure going.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
And that's why like tagging folks in to help with Magidora Masters was such a big part of why it can exist. Because if it was just me, like
Oh God.
it wouldn't
Yeah.
have made it past 1 year. I don't even know if that 1 year would happen. And I'm
Yeah.
I'm really glad everybody kind of bought in, right? Because
Hmm.
I sent you like a PowerPoint presentation, right? Which I
Yes.
probably made at like 2 in the morning on a night where I was like, I want to have a tournament series. I'm going to make a PowerPoint about it, and then I'm going to share it with people, and hopefully they say yes. So I sent it to you. I sent it to Sheridan, who runs Magical Drop at Genesis. I sent it to Bollier at the time, who I had running EU brackets as qualifiers and stuff like that. So the fact that everybody was like, "Oh, this seems neat, let's do it," paid off because everybody could have got my PowerPoint presentation, and be like, "What? Why do you want to do this? That's weird."
I mean, for me, I didn't even need that. We were already just running Magical Drop on a bi-monthly anyway. It's just throw a
Yeah, for sure.
qualifier name over it.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think I need the least amount of convincing.
right.
Anyway, so going back to being Mr. Face, you've had a lot of chances to be sort of an ambassador for the game, even beyond our continent right now.
Yeah,
You want to talk about some of your experiences on an international level?
for sure. One, I like to just kind of caveat it by saying like I am humbled by the opportunity to have these chances to go and play abroad. I think it was especially humbling. I was sitting in like a izakaya after going to the arcade in Japan this year, and it like really struck me as to like how lucky I am to be part of all of this. And two, I'm privileged enough to have the disposable income that I can travel to these places because none of these trips are sponsored; they're just by happenstance. But still, I feel really really honored to kind of participate with these other scenes around the world and have them want to host me when I'm in town. So there's been two such occasions. I'm not going to count Genesis among this namely because and Big House, like the U.S. tournaments that I've been to meet people and play, just because I was going to be at them anyway, pretty
Mhm.
much. Uh, but the two big ones that stand out are France and Japan. So we talked a little bit about the French scene already. The Japanese scene is also very, very strong at this game. And I think the biggest thing for the Japanese scene is that they do not play online, right?
Mhm.
They don't really believe in emulation in Japan. And they are very strict about like, we're not going to play online with you guys on Fightcade or whatever. I think there was a very short period of time where one or two of them were on Fightcade, but to my understanding, they weren't even like playing from their home devices. They were like taking it to like a computer cafe and playing on a device that wasn't their own because they didn't want to be associated with the emulation. So it's pretty wild. Um, so for France, it was 2022, and I was traveling to a wedding in Toulouse, which is in like the southish of France, to my understanding.
Mhm.
Um, and I had planned to go to Paris for a few days ahead of time because I had never been to Paris before, and I was traveling with my wife and some of our friends for the wedding. And a couple of months before the trip, I ended up reaching out to the players online to see if there was any sort of in-person event. And I didn't know how centralized they were, right? Like, do a lot of them live in Paris? Do they live all over France and they're all just playing online? And thankfully, Chef, who is one of the original moderators of the Magical Drop Discord that we all kind of participate on, said that there's a small arcade slash manga cafe slash board game cafe that exists in Paris that has arcade cabinets in the basement where they meet up from time to time. So, with Chef's help, they organized an event for me. The tournament ended up being probably about 8 to 12 people, if I recall correctly, with 5 or 6 of them being like core community members from the French scene, like folks that I had met online or played with. Um, and I think, you know, due to the time constraints that we had, because we were playing in like this little arcade that had to open and close at specific times, we ended up playing like first to one for a little while, which was nutty and not something that I really expect outside of Japan. But there was at least a winners and a losers bracket there. So that tournament was a lot of fun. It was great to meet the all the folks over there. I ended up winning that one. It was like me versus Lamel in grand finals.
Ah,
Uh,
the hack
and
match god.
neither of us played on cam at the time. Like we were both keyboard players, so the two of us like trying to mash through each other on stick was very funny. Um, so that was a lot of fun. It was also really funny to be like basically dropped off for my play date by my wife and some of our friends who were traveling with us. They all like wanted to come see the arcade, so they like brought me there to like drop me off, and I was like, okay, goodbye everybody. I'm going to my first day at school. Um, so that was great. And then this year, so it was actually just a couple months ago, I was on my honeymoon. Um, and we went to Japan, we went to Seoul, and we went to Hong Kong. So knowing that that was going to happen, I kind of reached out to the Japanese scene. Like I've wanted to do a meetup with them for a few years, and obviously due to the pandemic and a bunch of other extenuating circumstances, we couldn't travel to Japan for a while. Um, so this one was definitely a little bit more premeditated than the Paris one, which was just like, oh, I'm going to happen to be here. Do you guys want to play? So I reached out to Maruda and Yasube, who I've mentioned both of them in advance of my honeymoon, being like, how do I help organize something so that I can meet all the Japanese players? And they put me in touch with Baba from Takadano Baba Mikado, the big arcade, and Baba basically did all of the work. They scheduled a bracket. That was just their traditional, like when they get together, they have like the first to one single elimination bracket, which is terrifying. And I lost immediately because I was really nervous. To Anvil, who's not only a good player but a speedrunner who kind of does a lot of like the RTA in Japan stuff for Magical Drop, so they are like a good face for the scene over there. But they also scheduled a kumite format afterwards, which is essentially just like put me on one side of the cab, and then anybody who wanted to play me would just sit down on the other side of the cab, and we'd run a first to three in that scenario. So I ended up playing pretty much everybody who came to the arcade at least 2 or 3 times during the Kumite. And I was definitely more settled in at that point, less nervous, and I was playing a lot better during the Kumite than I was playing during the actual bracket. So it was at least nice to get that redemption of, you know, not immediately like I lost to Anvil, and Anvil is a good player, but I fucking choked. I killed myself.
Mhm.
I self piled one round. I couldn't tell what color ball I was holding because like when you play at the arcade, you sit so much closer to the cabinet than I sit to my screen at home.
Oh yeah.
So I was just like, I can't see the clown and the board at the same time. So I didn't know I was holding green, and I was like mashing trying to pick up yellow, and I got killed by pressure. So I think just like all of the nerves went away after losing in bracket like that, and then playing like normal afterwards was a lot easier. I think I was there for like 5 or 6 hours just playing Magical Drop with folks, and they just like wanted to keep playing. So it was really awesome to spend time with them. I think the other thing that was kind of like a big shock was I got there and there was like folks playing casuals, and I like sat down to play a casual against somebody, and she immediately just beat me. And I was like, oh shit, is like everybody here that good? Like am I just gonna get washed by like every Japanese player? And then I went afterwards, I was talking to and their name is slipping my mind, so I really apologize. There was one player there who was basically my interpreter, and his English wasn't that strong either, so we were kind of just
Mhm.
Google translating between the two of us, but they were the one who was kind of facilitating for me, so big shout
Mhm.
outs to them and thank you. Um, I asked him like, "Who do you think is going to win?" And then he wrote down the name of the woman who had just kicked my ass, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like I'm less scared now than if everybody was just baseline that good. And they beat me on like one of my best characters too. I picked Chariot and I just got whooped, and I was like, "Oh shit! Like what's going to happen to me?" I think the other thing too that was very cool about all of the travel opportunities is that everybody's play style is very different, kind of across the different nations. France less so because we have a lot more exposure to the European scene. I've played a lot of those people before,
Mhm.
and I think the general skill level, not to slander France, but I think the general skill level in Europe is lower than the general skill level in Japan. Right? I think there's just more strong players in Japan that I had no experience playing against before,
Mhm.
versus France, where I've played against most of their strong players previously and kind of knew what their style would be. Um, Japan plays a very strange form of magical drop, uh, namely because like they are a lot more focused on efficiency in a way that it feels like a lot of the North American, South American players that I am used to playing are not. And it also feels like because of that, I think their defense is a little bit weaker. A lot more games ended on pressure in Japan
Mhm.
than I would anticipate ending on pressure in the U.S. or against South America. And what the weirdest thing about that to me is they were still super good. Like their play style is very different. It feels like a little bit more aggressive overall in the terms of like how many games are ending on pressure, but they weren't. There was no detriment to them because of that. And Maruda, who was there, and I got to meet in person, I was very honored to meet them because they're such an impetus to like all of this happening and like play Magical Drop existing. Um, they wrote articles. They reached out to me afterward to be like, name a couple of matches that you thought were particularly interesting, and I will write articles about like dissecting the match essentially. And all of the articles are basically like, birdup plays like a wild man. Like, why does he play like this? He's not paying any attention to like which color is going to be coming in next from the trash pattern. He doesn't wait for lines to line up so that he could get like an extra clear or cut like one thing. He's doing like 5 chains. Why is he doing this? And then they all end with like, he's really good and he won this round. So I don't know what happened, but he should very clearly think more about this game. And I'm like, no, I don't want to think about anything. I'm over here playing Magic Drop because I don't want to think.
Oh my God.
they're
That's
they're a culture full of so if you play Magical Drop and you've heard Deca Fumo Death Cult on commentary, Deca is the kind of person to be like, oh, this board start has a special orb 5 lines deep, and if you pull up 5 lines, you're guaranteed to find the special orb. Or like you could do this setup on the opening board and get like a quadruple simultaneous clear, or for certain that you're playing justice, so the next line that's going to be fed is yellow because the previous line that was fed is green. And I have none of that knowledge, right? I exist at like the top echelon of Magical Drop based solely on vibes and my ability to play really fast and to kind of not crumble under pressure. So I'm playing against an entire country of players who are very analytical, and my play style is just the complete opposite of that. And it was very funny to kind of see those like come to a head at this tournament.
just throwing arms up, I guess, when it
Yeah,
comes just like. But
Pretty much.
yeah, I mean, look, you can always focus on the what would have worked or what can happen or what your opportunities are, but having mental stamina feels like a very, very, very important thing in magical drop in particular. And
Yeah.
if you can get by on just willpower, do it. Do it.
I think we had joked at one point during a stream where I had mentioned that Hangman is just the vibes character of Magical Drop,
Hmm.
and I exist as the vibes player of Magical Drop. I think
Ah,
that the other thing I found really interesting as like a final note on the Japan trip was like my place in the pecking order of Japan feels very similar to my place in the pecking order of our like international scene that I'm most active in, right? There's like one or two players that are at the top of the top of the pecking order that feel like I could maybe beat them, but I'm certainly not favored, right? Like I
yeah.
can take games off Wanpa, I could take games or even sets sometimes off of Rudolph, but like you're never gonna send me in and be like, oh yeah, Birdup's got this one. It's like in the bag, right? Then there's a group of players where we're all very close in skill level. So myself and the Scherzos and maybe Draco, but I think he might be graduating out of this tier. But there's a handful of players like right in my wheelhouse where we have very close games. It's like a 50-50 coin flip every time we play who's going to come out on the winner. And then there's like the everybody else tier that's like I am favored against them and it'd be an upset if I lost to them. And I found the same thing when I was in Japan. There was like one or two players at the arcade, Maruda included, who was like, I don't know how I'm going to beat these people. There was a bunch of players that were just like right around my skill level that every match was very close. And then there was a bunch of players who were just like learning or newer to the game that was like, I'm favored, and if they beat me, then it's an upset.
Hmm.
So I traveled however many thousands of miles to be like, oh yeah, this feels very familiar in terms of like my place in the scene.
Have you ever been able to show Maruda or anyone on the Japan side footage from like Majidora Masters?
I think they consume it secondhand through my YouTube channel.
Okay.
I don't know if I haven't had like a strict conversation with them about it. I would really like to see. I tweeted at Maruda after Majidora Masters 3 finished this year to tell him to watch the finals of Majidora Masters 3 and write like a little article about it. And he didn't respond. And I think that's in part due to like, I probably tweeted at him at like 3 in the morning
Hmm.
Japan time. I would really like to see his note, the way that he dissected my matches, and like this guy plays like a psychopath. I'd
Hmm.
really like to see him dissect Wanpa and Rudolph, who I think
Exactly.
play like psychopaths, but also have an element of that optimization in a way that I do not have in my game. And I think that's kind of like the biggest difference between the two of us. They play as fast as I do, but they also play a little bit smarter than I do. I would be very interested to see what they have to say about that. And hopefully at some point in time, we get the Maruda take on it because honestly, like he is the source of truth on things magical drop, in my opinion, right? If he tells me something, I'm just gonna take it at face value. It's like he's right, and whatever I'm doing is probably wrong. I think it's like a last note on the international stuff. There's still some, you know, traveling for events is something I definitely do less of now than maybe pre-pandemic when I was really active in a bunch of other scenes and traveling for tournaments like CEO and Evo and Genesis, etc. So I maybe go to like one tournament a year at this point, not counting the Japan trip or the France thing.
Mm.
Um, but I would really like to go to HFS Play, which is the French arcade event that Valier has like tweeted at me to come to a couple of times. It's just not somewhere convenient in France. It's like a couple of hours outside of Paris via the train in like this small town where I assume they could get the space more easily.
Hmm.
Um, but I would love to go to that if at some point like the stars align for me to do so. And I'd really like to go to Fightcade Fest, which is in Spain, which is hosted by I believe the guys who developed Fightcade, or at least they have a close association with them.
Hmm.
Um, so I'd really like to go to like either of those two events. And again, the Fightcade Fest is also like it's not in Barcelona; it's in like some other random town that's like a bunch of hours away by train. So if at some point things work out where it makes sense for me to go to one of those two events, I would really like to do so. Um, and I think those are the two biggest magical drop adjacent events that I have not attended that I would like to check out.
All right. And for the last question before we wrap up for today, what
Yeah.
is your hopes for the future of the Magical Drop 3 scene?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll be honest here, and I'll say most of my like hopes in gaming are less circled around the magical drop scene itself, and more about like I want to do cool stuff, and I would like to continue to do cool stuff that I think is interesting. I think the nice thing about that, and for magical drop in general, is that I love magical drop. So wherever I go to do my cool stuff, there's probably a very good chance that magical drop comes along with me, right? I think it's like on my back in terms of like it's just like I carry it with me where I go. If I'm going to go host an event for something, there's probably a good chance that magical drop will be part of that. um, but I think to break it down, let's first talk about like tournament organizing, I guess, and then secondly, just about like other stuff that I am looking forward to in the future. But for tournament organizing wise, one, I'd like to. We talked about this, but I'm like very hard to pin down on like a week to week sort of thing, especially for months on end. But I
Mm.
could definitely undertake assisting on like some large one-time event sort of thing. I think that would be better for the way that I focus and pay attention to things. So I think some sort of like IRL wider puzzle game community event, specifically leveraging the space available to us at one of those pre-existing FGC or Smash majors, whether it's Combo Breaker, Frosty Faustines, Genesis, CEO, Evo, the ones that just like have space for community events to happen. I would love to get a bunch of puzzle game organizers together, or even just like work with Puzzle Wednesday and host some sort of like multi-game puzzle tournament, or some sort of like big puzzle mystery bracket. But I think having individual brackets for specific games would probably be more appealing to getting people to actually travel out for it, right? I think that's the one thing that the FGC has that puzzle games in general are missing is there's no centralized event for puzzle game players to go and participate in the culture, right?
Mm.
And I also think that like putting everybody who enjoys this genre in one place could lead to a lot of crossover potential that doesn't exist as much online. I mean, Puzzle Wednesday sort of has it by being a variety game stream and having people who are just Puzzle Wednesday players who will enter whatever the weekly tournament is. But I think there's a lot of folks that exist in like maybe Magical Drop less so because our scene is small, but like Puyo Tetris, Puzzle Fighter, some of like the bigger.
There's a lot of islands, yes.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of islands. And I think if you kind of push them all closer together, it'll incentivize people to try other games and find ones that they enjoy to a similar degree that they enjoy their own game. Um, I say this out of experience from being part of like the fighting game scene for a long time. How many fighting games I have picked up and dabbled in because I was walking by them at CEO or at Evo or at Combo Breaker and been like, that looks cool. I want to play that game. Uh, it's like a very easy way to get people into new titles. And I think you could probably incentivize that in some way, right? So say we go to Combo Breaker collectively
Hmm.
and we're hosting like puzzle games at Combo Breaker where Puyo Tetris, Magical Drop, you know, uh, like Puzzle Fighter, etc., all exist and they're all hosting brackets at the same time. You say, okay, it's $10 to enter the tournament of your choice, but then you also get entry into one other
Oh,
bracket
you get like a
by
freebie.
default,
Yeah.
right? You get like a freebie, right? You set a cap. It's like anybody who enters gets 3 tickets to enter brackets. They go and they pick the 3 games that they want to run. So they're obviously playing their main game, but they're incentivized for free to basically play one of the other games, even if it's not one that they have a lot of familiarity in. And if you're running the game as like running the tournament as like a tight enough ship, it makes it just a lot easier for them to just like dip their toes in and be like, do I like this game? Do I not like this game? And then be like, okay, well, I didn't lose anything by participating because I didn't have to pay, or like I was already, paid up for this other game.
Yeah, honestly, I like the idea.
And I think in terms of like, so that's the IRL angle that I would like to kind of move towards. And I really wanted to get back to Combo Breaker anyway. It's like my favorite tournament of all time, and I haven't been in a few years, so I think this would be a good impetus for like me to get back to going. And CEO also, I know a lot of you are in Florida. Now that CEO is moving out of Daytona, I'm more willing to go back to CEO. uh,
I can't blame
but
you.
yeah. But in terms of like online events, uh, I'm a sucker for any sort of like team tournament, especially since I played Third Strike for a really long time, and like some of my most fun memories of that game are like doing 5 versus 5 team tournaments in like the basement of our local arcade.
Mhm.
Um, but I want to do some sort of like Olympics or World Cup inspired format where we have like X number of like showcase games that players are nominated to participate in, and that you're awarding some sort of like medal points to the country of the people who place like top three in each of those games, and you have like a round robin for each showcase game. So we say like we maybe pick like 10 games in total. Every game has one player from a specific country to represent them, and then all of those players play a round robin, and then you have just like a medal points at the end to see like who came out on top. I wanted to run a World Cup one for Magical Drop where it was like teams of three, where everybody on the team had to be from a specific country, which I think is where the original Team USA joke came from for the group chat I'm in with Xerxes and Endeka. And then you'd play like sort of like the teams format I'm used to in Street Fighter, where you match up two players, the winner stays on, the loser gets knocked out, and then your team when all three players on your team are knocked out, you're out. I think Argentina would have a pretty strong advantage in this tournament. But now I think Brazil has a really good shot. Uh, Team USA, I'm sorry, I don't really like our chances. Mexico probably had a better shot in the past when like Templanza and stuff was more active and Butts. But I still think they'd probably be able to field a pretty solid team.
Mhm.
We have enough countries that have like 3 or 4 active strong players that we could probably host a pretty fun bracket for this.
All right, all right.
And I think that brings me to outside of organizing, just like things that I would like to see is just I kind of want to graduate at some point from being like guy who does little game projects by himself to guy who works on with a small team to build an indie game.
Mhm.
Uh, the problem that I have there, and if you're listening to this and you don't know what I made so I'm just like teaching myself how to code, so it's all sort of new to me. But I made the Azumanga Daioh Magical Pop, which was like the reimagining of Azumanga Daioh uh, Puzzle Bobble into a Magical Drop style game. And I've made a couple of other small Godot projects, and I'm now working on a Game Boy project so that I could end up with like a Game Boy cartridge that I could show off to people, which I think would be cool. The issue is that I'm like okay at everything. I'm okay at coding. I'm okay at making graphics. I'm okay at writing story and doing all that sort of stuff. But I'm not like super talented at one specific thing, and I think it's a lot harder to fit like the jack of all trades into a team environment than it is to fit like this is the person that we rely on to do all of XYZ, and they're that person on the team, and there's like somebody else to do the other portion that they don't cover. So maybe it happens at some point, uh, but we'll see. I'll wait patiently for my opportunity in that regard.
It'll come around.
Yeah, we hope so. Um, and I'm also just hoping, in a Magical Drop specific sense, we didn't really touch on it at all. I think we alluded to it briefly. So Magical Drop 6 exists. It came out in the last year or so. Um, and because of like a lot of sort of technical difficulties that existed within the game and development of the game, and the slow life cycle of like releasing updates for the game, it's been hard to kind of keep the momentum going for the new title. I will say, uh, I think the game at a core is very fun because it's just Magical Drop. And I think they solve a lot of the issues that Magical Drop 3 Online has in terms of your controller works the way that you anticipate your controller is supposed to work, which Magical Drop 3 sometimes just says like, fuck you, like that input you put in, that didn't exist. Sorry. Right? How many times I've seen people or been victimized by the Magical Drop 3 control scheme, uh, I cannot count. But Magical Drop 6 feels very fluid, and the game at a core feels very strong. The issue is being able to connect to other people and, you know, spectate so that we can host tournaments and things like that. It has improved with this most recent update, and I actually, Juicy, I want to talk to you in the future about like, should we try to run a Magical 6 bracket
Mhm.
since we now have the means to do so. Um, but I would really like to continue to see them succeed. In part, one because I'm selfish and I love Magical Drop and I want to play more Magical Drop, and then two because I think we need more examples of somebody taking an old IP and reviving it in a way that is still holding to like the original ethos of the game, essentially.
Mm.
Uh, I think there's not a lot of that in terms of like people taking an old, especially like a puzzle game IP, and bringing it back for a new generation of people and having it still appeal to the folks who enjoyed that game in the first place. Obviously, we don't need to mention Magical Drop 5, right? So that is the previous. Obviously, Magical Drop 6 did better than that,
Yes.
but that bar is on the floor,
Uh-huh.
right? So Magical Drop 6 is a step up from what we could have had, but I would like to see it continue to grow should the company developing it have resources and time to continue to polish it. Because I think there is a glimmer of something that could be very fun and lasting long term there. There just needs to be a couple more tweaks to get people to be invested the same way that we're invested in Magical Drop 3.
Yeah. For me, running Magical Drop 6 would be more a matter of principle because it breaks my heart that there's just a lack of tournament infrastructure built into
Yeah,
games still.
yeah.
Pour one out for Puzzle Bobble Every Bubble, the game that I would be
That game is
playing.
great.
It's
But like,
fantastic.
yeah,
Shame that you can't really like organize anything with it
right.
online.
Yeah.
But Pedal Crash has been incredibly kind with us with the feature sets that we've requested. Uh,
Hmm.
Same with Hamster Scramble. And
Yeah.
if it's something that can just be another on the list of this is a game that gave us everything we need to be able to give it a life beyond launch week,
Yeah.
I have to advocate for that at least on some level.
Yeah, and I think putting my product manager hat on, right? Like I feel like in this day and age, some form of tools to facilitate spectating need is like a core part of any sort of online infrastructure for games because of how many more players are expecting online tournaments for specific games and how much more ubiquitous streaming of those tournaments are, right? Like how many more eyeballs are you going to get on the game that you created by making sure there's tools for people to promote your game than spending those on yet another single player mode or some sort of like hats for your avatar or some like weird shit that you get out of a lot of like modern fighting games.
Yeah, it's again singling out every bubble. Man, they did it. It is one of the most feature rich, like for its price point, puzzle games
Yep.
in a long time. But it's been so hard to recommend it to anyone other than like people I know locally who will play it with me
Yeah.
because it's I don't want to go back to, and I don't mean this as derogatory as it may sound, but like there was definitely more of a dark ages in Puyo and Puyo Tet tournaments where like a lot of times a tournament organizer didn't have any choice but to tap like one of the top seeds of the bracket to stream their run, and that would just be the tournament experience for the viewers, and it's rough. It's rough. Not even just on a
Yeah.
you have a very linear experience. You might not get such niceties as commentary or um, a well-paced stream run, but there's just nothing grounding the experience in like as a group activity, and you also just are never ever guaranteed that any of that's going to work out. You could have a top seed that doesn't have the means to stream. You could
Yeah.
all your regulars could just be out in a given week. It's like I guess the only real mark that any of this happened was a challenge bracket or a start GG bracket.
Yeah.
So no,
I
like
also think that like a lot of these games don't give you the tools to like play easily with friends either, right? So
mm-hmm.
like I think there's such a big thing for for these sort of like one-on-one games in general that it's so much easier to stick with the game when you're playing people who there's like a face that you associate with the other side of the screen, right?
Mhm.
Or at least a name of somebody who like you're gonna need to have a social interaction with them again. Versus like the attitude of people that I meet that are just like ranked grinders that are just in the all I do is play a faceless person on the internet. Um, it's so much harder to like get those people to be engaged long term, and it's so much harder to get them to be like good citizens of their scene because a lot of the stuff that you see, especially like if you look at scrub quotes and things like that, people on the internet can be fucking mean,
Yes.
and they're more likely to do that when there's no repercussion associated with like knowing the other person on the other side of the controller, right?
Hmm.
Like I've never, in my experience in all my years playing, the number of times I've seen an incident anywhere near like with the stuff you see come out online happen in a real environment, I don't I if I could count, it's on maybe one hand, right? Versus like how ubiquitous harassment and derogatory comments towards people are when it's just like, oh, I met this guy in ranked and he plays like an asshole, so I'm gonna just like blame him and tell him to kill himself kind of deal, right? You'll never get that at a local unless like the person running your local doesn't know what they're doing at all and can't foster a scene. But like it's just so much more likely that when you are connected to somebody, even tangentially, uh, that you're going to have a good time playing with them and that you're going to find a way to kind of like get them to stick with the game in a way that they normally wouldn't.
Hmm. That's
And I just like want more developers to like think about that and find a way to make that sort of like friendly competition the main mode of online versus the sort of like ranked play against an anonymous face kind of vibe that a lot of games seem to be steering towards.
it's unfortunate,
Yeah.
but that's what I hope that we kind of manage to patch up a little bit with the tools we have for Puzzle Wednesday.
Yeah, for sure. I
Anyway,
think so. I think it's always the onus is going to fall on organizers at some point, regardless. But at least give us like you said, like give us the tools that we need to make it happen. We'll promote your game for you. Just give us the tools to do it.
God bless, you're right.
Yeah, I'm giving you free advertising, please.
I want this to work.
Yeah, you want this to work, also, game developer. You want people to buy your game. Let me at least show it off.
All right, and I think that's going to be a wrap for us. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course, it was wonderful to be here, and I look forward to collaborating with you guys in the future.
Any other shout outs you want to make before we wrap up?
Um, Shout out to so one thing, if you can and you're still interested, if this is like the first you're hearing about Magical Drop and you want to learn more, obviously check out playmagicaldrop.com. There's also a video on one of my friends' YouTube accounts. It should be Nilpholan, Nilphola. I can't spell. Nilpholan. Uh, where he did basically a story about me and the Magical Drop scene and like similar to this sort of interview, like how we got to where we are. And I believe it's called like Magical Drop 3. Magical Drop shouldn't have died, so it didn't. So if you can find that on YouTube, I think it's very interesting. There's some like good encapsulation of some of the stuff we talked about today, and also Phil is a very talented filmmaker and makes documentaries about a lot of other stuff. And I don't think I'd be as involved in the scene if it wasn't for like he's my travel buddy for like the longest time, and one of my best friends ever. So the fact that he and I traveled to all of these majors together, like I wouldn't have been active in any of these games if I didn't have somebody to go with. So shout outs to Phil. Shout outs to a lot of my very close friends here in New York City, even though I'm not going to name all of them by name. You guys kind of keep me sane. To my wife for putting up with all of the stuff that I do. So thank you, Katie. And also for chaperoning me to not only the French event, but she took me to the arcade for Japan on our honeymoon and translated for me because she speaks Japanese. So that was, you know, more than I could ask. And shout outs to you guys here at Puzzle Wednesday. Shout outs to Team USA, so Deca and Xerxian, who also keep me sane behind the scenes. And to some other folks like anybody organizing for this game, to people like Bank, who have been creating, mods of the game for us to kind of facilitate running tournaments. Uh, and yeah, I think that kind of covers it.
Alrighty. Well, we will catch you guys next time.